Story 1. As Keanu Reeves so eloquently said, I know the ones who love us will miss us. Story 2. I can only hope to see my son and daughter again. That's all I really want. Story 3. I hope I'm wrong, but I imagine absolute nothingness. I was in a coma years ago and felt as if I had snapped out of existence. I think death is like that. Story 4. The same thing that happened before I was born was nothingness. Story 5. Nothing. Your energy dissipates and you no longer exist except in people's memories. This screws me up. I have believed this wholeheartedly my entire life, yet I still talk to my dead husband every day as if he were with me. Story 6. I think once you die, that's it. You simply stop existing. I have not seen any solid proof of anything beyond that. Story 7. I have no idea, but as strange as it may seem, I really liked how The Good Place ended. The bad place was where you were tested repeatedly until you became a better person. The good place was where you could take as long as needed to fully experience life and, when you were ready, pass through a gate and release your energy back into the world, perhaps giving another soul a spark of inspiration or joy. Story 8. To your consciousness, it simply ends. However, the impact you made on the world is passed on. A tip you gave on how to do something is passed to another person. Your loved ones remember you, live on, and pass along a joke you made or a memory of you. Story 9. There is no evidence for reincarnation, but the idea appeals to me. Story 10. You do not feel anything because you are dead, and your senses are not present. It is absolute nothingness. Story 11. You return to the earth, and its little helpers will feast on you. Story 12. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. I believe that our spiritual energy returns to the universe and will eventually reincarnate. If you research dimethyltryptamine experiences, you can get a good idea of how they may feel. Dimethyltryptamine is released naturally twice in life, when you are born and when you die, so it stands to reason that dimethyltryptamine and death are intrinsically connected. One person described his experience using 5-methoxy N-dimethyltryptamine, a highly potent variant of dimethyltryptamine, as feeling like he was sucked out of his body. He said that within a few seconds you are completely sure you have died and that it may be what happens when you die. He said it feels like you are connected to everything, with no separation between you and the universe. You are part of the soup of it all. I feel like you will come back someday, but I cannot promise it will be here on Earth or when. I believe there is a positive plane and a negative plane that you may be drawn into once you cross that threshold. Think of it like tuning your frequency to match what you want to manifest. Whatever frequency you attune to and the state your soul is in when you die will heavily influence which plane you enter, positive or negative, or perhaps something in between. I have no scientific evidence to support this. It is an innate feeling. One undeniable fact, however, is that this life is an illusion. To what end, I do not know. Story 13. There is increasing evidence that human consciousness is a form of quantum information. I believe that when we die, our ego or sense of self dissipates, but a sense of interconnectedness with everything remains. That is like a peaceful sleep. The quantum information disorganizes and, in a sense, our consciousness transforms into something indescribable. Story 14. Nothing. The energy and matter that made you are reabsorbed by the universe and scrambled into randomness. Story 15. My stuff gets thrown to the curb. Some people laugh, some people cry, and life goes on for them. Story 16. The Dalai Lama said that on my deathbed I would achieve total clarity. I have that going for me, which is nice. Story 17. My opinion. There is no more existence. Fade to black. Game over. Story 18. If something happens to you after you die, we will have to redefine death to start after that event. Story 19. I think it's probably nothing, but my brain doesn't have a great history of being my best friend. Story 20. Your heart stops, the brain ceases functioning, and the body shuts down. No food is consumed and no heat is generated. You are placed in a coffin and the body decomposes. Insects consume soft tissue, and remaining parts produce an unpleasant odor and turn into soil. Bones may persist for a long time, Billions of years will pass without your awareness. Story 21. You rot in the ground, or you are cremated if you are lucky. Story 22. Decomposition. I have always been baffled as to why our particular species of primate thinks it is somehow magical. Story 23. Your body rots. Your loved ones miss and remember you. Hopefully you left this earth a better place than you found it, even in a small way. Story 24. I wish this were analogous to what happens after death. However, I'm pretty sure this is it. One life, one shot. Make it a good one. Story 25. With the vast expanse of space alone, it is most certainly not nothing. Story 26. As a conscious being, nothing will remain. No soul, no ghost, no afterlife, no God. Just nothing. Story 27. Your brain goes bonkers as a coping mechanism. Euphoric delusions occupy your mind while everything else shuts down. Then there is less than nothing. Story 28. Sadly, I do not know. I would like there to be an afterlife, but I have no clue what happens after we die. Some say we will find out. If there is nothingness, though, we will not. In that case, we cannot think or be upset about the absence of an afterlife because we will already be dead and unable to think. Story 29. Your body is put in a metal cupboard and burned. That is it. Story 30. Keanu said, I know the ones who love us will miss us. Story 31. Float on a puffy cloud with Jesus while he listens to what everyone is thinking. Story 32. From your point of view, existence ends. There is no time, no thought, no dreams, no light, and no darkness. It is like when you feel like you blinked but actually fell asleep for a moment without dreaming. Just a split second. It is that permanently. Story 33. You have been transferred to a liminal hellscape wallpapered with all your deleted selfies. Story 34. I have decided to create my own belief system. I choose to believe that when anything dies, its consciousness is transferred to a new body and that it gets to live in a post-scarcity society. In a practically infinite universe, it seems inevitable that an advanced species would have cracked faster than light travel, developed to the point where scientific inquiry is of greatest interest, and felt a responsibility to preserve life in all its forms because of its rarity. They would never tell us they were doing this, because belief in mortality provides life with its sense of meaning, and it would be immoral to deprive us of that. I am well aware I have no evidence of this and will probably never find out, but it makes a great deal more sense to me than a magic man in the sky for whom we are the center of all creation. It would also help explain religious stories. Any suitably advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, as Arthur C. Clarke once said. It may even be that they gave us religion because extensive simulations showed it was the only way for us to survive as a species. For the record, I am an atheist, but my views on the evils of religion have changed recently in light of the idea of counterfactuals. We can say that it has caused an unknown number of deaths, but we have no idea what the alternative could have been. Just as killing Donald Trump as a baby could have led to even worse outcomes. Story 35. Physics says energy is conserved, so our bodies contribute energy and nourishment to a planet's life cycle. Thought or brain energy might go elsewhere as well, but humans are not yet advanced enough to determine that. It would be fascinating if some of our thought energy were converted into a photon, a neutrino, or a similar particle. Existing as a particle would be very interesting. Story 36. You are either cremated or buried in the ground, where you become worm food. Story 37. Given what is called the hard problem of consciousness, I do not think consciousness is the result of matter and energy. I think the first thing that happens after death is the surprise of realizing I still exist, which is probably a very scary experience in itself. Story 38. I think the light people see, often interpreted as angels or something similar, is just the brain shutting down. Why do people say heaven was so peaceful? It is probably because they literally just died twice on the way to the operating room from massive internal bleeding, and the brain is going to try to make you feel relaxed and comfortable. Story 39. You are remembered for a few generations at most. Then you become a distant part of the world's story. I try to view it on a micro level. If I can make someone else's life a little better while we float on this rock, I will always try to do that. Story 40. Your children live on, and your immortal genes carry on into the future. We just stop after serving our purpose and then generally live a good deal longer than strictly needed. Story 41. You become an all-you-can-eat buffet for creepy crawlies. Story 42. It's like you went to sleep without dreaming and never woke up the next morning. That's absolutely fine. I'm looking forward to death. If only it were that peaceful. You would likely suffer the worst pain of your life or become extremely ill and feel utterly destroyed. After the suffering and absolute horror, it might then be like going to sleep. I'm really sorry you're feeling this. If you are thinking about harming yourself or are in immediate danger, please call your local emergency number now. If you can, reach out to someone you trust or a health professional. If you are in the United States, you can call or text 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you are elsewhere, please contact local emergency services or crisis line in your country. If you'd like, I can stay and listen. Story 43. We all go back to the great Egg McMuffin in the sky. There is absolutely no proof otherwise. Story 44. We will no longer see this question appear on the AskReddit subreddit every day. Story 45. I was dead for 13.7 billion years before I was born. I imagine it's a lot like that. Story 46. I do not know, and I am okay with that. There is no need to make up stories or theories. Story 47. Your brain stops working. That is essentially what it means to be dead. As far as we can tell, a person's thoughts, feelings, and memories that constitute them reside in the brain. If the brain is damaged, those can be affected or lost. It follows from that observation that a total loss of the brain would be the loss of the person. Story 48. Hopefully nothing will cause that to exist. The idea of life after death has no appeal. Story 49. The world keeps on turning, and all that remains are memories of you, whether good, bad, or indifferent. Story 50. Nothing happens when you die. I think everything people say about being reunited with loved ones who have already died was made up to help us cope. Story 51. Sorry, I cannot provide or transform graphic descriptions of violence or bodily harm. You will have small plastic discs placed on your eyelids and lips to keep them closed. A large plug may be inserted into the rectum to prevent embalming fluids from leaking. Depending on your religious preferences, an officiant may speak about your life to friends and family. After the service, you will either be buried in a cemetery or cremated. If buried, the body will be interred in a grave. If cremated, the remains will be processed into ashes and returned to your loved ones for burial, placement, or scattering according to their wishes. Story 52. I died once and did not see anything. I think that is it. You are either born lucky or you are not. There is no karma or afterlife that will punish those who destroyed the planet or harmed others. No one will come after Trump, Bezos, Musk, Zuckerberg, or others. Story 53. We are the universe experiencing itself. Back to atoms. Story 54. I was never in contact with anyone who came back until now. Story 55. When you die, you are gone. Your consciousness simply ceases. There is nothing afterward, so enjoy your life. You did not exist before birth, and you will not exist after death. The lack of evidence for an afterlife suggests that belief in one is wishful thinking or fear of non-existence. Religions are often founded on that fear. Story 56. Do you remember what it was like before you were alive? It was probably like that. Story 57. For starters, you stop breathing, your organs shut down, and your brain ceases to function. After that, I have no idea, and I am in no hurry to find out. Story 58. Absolutely nothing. We become dust. Life carries on for those left behind. I'm at peace with that. Story 59. I think everyone goes to heaven, no matter how much of an asshole they are. Story 60. I think our energy is released from the body and continues as energy that never truly dies. Story 61. All the thinking and feeling you are doing stops. Imagine no more pain, no more fear, no more being too hot or too cold, and no more worries about what you did or did not do. It is going to be great. Story 62. Do you remember what it was like before you were born? Like that? Story 63. You watch the other players from above. Story 64. Complete non-existence, exactly as before I was conceived. Then my body is disposed of, preferably in a way that allows it to be consumed and the nutrients recycled, for example left in the mountains for scavengers so that someone 100 years from now could find my skull and put it on a shelf. Story 65. Your consciousness ceases to exist. Your body may be buried, cremated, or otherwise returned to the universe, but your consciousness will not be aware of it. Story 66. Being an atheist fucking sucks. I genuinely wish I were not one. Story 67. I think you leave your body and become energy again, joining a collective consciousness with our Creator. Our cells generate electricity, and there is a spark of light and energy when the sperm penetrates the egg, which ignites the fusion and division of cells. When we shed our body, a shadow comes over it as the soul leaves. Story 68. I cannot open or read external links. Please paste the video transcript or text you want edited. Also tell me how to handle acronyms. Replace each acronym with its full phrase every time, or expand the first occurrence only and leave the acronym thereafter, or spell out each letter of the acronym. When you paste the text, I will correct spelling, remove meaningless repetition, fix punctuation, remove special characters and links, and prepare the output optimized for Azure text-to-speech. Story 69. This is something I have always thought about. My dad just says it is like being asleep. For me, most of the time I do not dream, but sometimes I do. I guess it is something we will never know until it is our turn. Story 70. To be absent with the body is to be present with the Lord. And then the judgment. Story 71. I believe my spirit will leave my body. My body will be cremated while my spirit goes to heaven, where I will meet family and friends who died before me. I also believe most people will go to heaven, even if they are not believers. It is unprovable, I know, but I walk by faith, not by sight. Story 72. I believe in an afterlife with our Creator. It's just much more complex than the books we've read. Story 73. I do not know for sure because I have not died yet, but I like to believe that I will see my dog eagerly waiting for me and be able to play with him as much as he wants and more. Story 74. I had a vivid dream about death. It felt like falling slowly backward into a hammock, surrounded by blackness, but comforting rather than frightening. I imagine that is what death is like. Story 75. You are found, and this is where it gets tricky. Norm Macdonald, cautioning against autoerotic asphyxiation. Story 76. Void Man. The only things that survive of us are our children, the things we created, and the memories people have of us. Story 77. Ricky Gervais put it quite well. Imagine what it was like before you were born. That's what it's like when you die. Story 78. When we die, our bodies decompose and return to the earth, while our soul is released into a ball of energy that is technically part of the earth. This ball of energy contains all past energies. When your energy arrives, it mixes into the energy ball. When a new person, animal, or thing is created, pieces from the energy ball are used. No two people are exactly alike because the energies are mixed. The bits of energy come together, and personalities and quirks eventually find equilibrium. Children resemble their parents because some of the host energy is incorporated. I view the energy ball as heaven because it holds all energy and knowledge and is therefore everywhere at all times. You would have no needs. You would probably feel like being in a cloud. This is a work in progress. Pointing out any loopholes will convert me to Pastafarianism for the time being. Story 79. In my opinion, absolutely nothing. You no longer think. You do not know anything. You are gone. Story 80. It is probably oblivion. There is no afterlife. Nothing follows. You will lose consciousness forever. Story 81. I think there are many different options. Non-player characters are deleted for sure. Story 82. I have experienced many inexplicable events since I was a child, so I refuse to believe that we simply cease to exist. Story 83. You begin your life again on another Earth, and whether it turns out differently depends on the choices you make. Story 84. Your family fights over your belongings or complains that they have to clean up after you. Story 85. We become five-dimensional entities, able to pull back and see the entirety of our lives as one continuous object. Story 86. Well, since I want to go to Arlington and it's easier to be interred, I guess I'll get burned. Story 87. What happens when you are done playing with your Lego bricks and put them back in the box? The pieces can be assembled into new things. The pieces still exist, but they will never be you again. Even if you made another instance of a model of yourself, it would still be different. Story 88. I have narrowed it down to two choices: something or nothing. Story 89. We return to the void from which we came, never knowing we existed. Story 90. I think you return to the state of non-existence that you were in before conception. Story 91. I will be with a partner on a cloud, or the star child from the end of 2001. Story 92. Everything else happens, but I will not be conscious of any of it. That does not sound too bad. I am already watching my worst nightmares come true. When the slavers come, I will check out. I am not putting myself through all that bullshit. Story 93. See the movie Waking Life. It is beautiful, eloquent, and very plausible while remaining peaceful. Story 94. Follow me on this. 1. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. We run on energy, and our energy goes somewhere. 2. We have all come from non-existence into existence. We have crossed that threshold between life and death. I do not see why it could not happen again. 3. We can create lungs, hearts, and all manner of body parts, but we cannot create a human. That means something is missing. I believe that missing element is the energy that inhabits you, your soul. I believe in a form of reincarnation. The best way to explain this is with a bowl of sand and a spoon. You scoop one spoonful of sand out. That is you when you are born. Those exact grains make up who you are. When you die, your sand is returned to the ever-mixing bowl. Your exact grains are unlikely to be selected again, but small pieces of you will be scattered throughout life. This will continue as long as energy exists in the universe. Story 95. We did not exist before we were born, and we will not exist after we die. Why do we assume an afterlife or a God, when animals and other beings do not? Are we entitled because we can think and feel more than the birds outside? Story 96. Who can answer this kind of question? Personally, as an atheist, I would say nothing. Story 97. Everyone is saying nothing. I think there's a pattern. There must have been something before we were born. What caused our birth? Story 98. Fun fact. Nobody knows, not the Pope or any other religious leader. I have no clue, but I am honest enough to admit it. Personally, I think death is the end, and I am fine with that. Story 99. If unlucky, a few sick people desecrate your corpse. If lucky, someone will mourn your passing. If unlucky, the tax collector finds everything you own and collects what is owed. If lucky, friends and family lead good lives. If unlucky, you exist in a realm where you can still watch. If lucky, you find ultimate peace. Story 100. Maybe reincarnation, or it starts over like a loop, or an all-knowing God explains everything. But I doubt it's all over and nothing happens. Story 101. I become food for decomposers just like all other animals that die on this planet. Story 102. Dark tunnel, bright white light. Your soul is lured into being reborn into this world as a new life, which could be human, animal, or another form. You are promised every good thing: wealth, fame, an easy life. You remember how hard your previous life was, and you would love to live again as someone rich and powerful. As soon as you agree, your memory is wiped and you are sent to be born as the child of poor parents who struggle with addiction. Story 103. The common answer here is nothing. What a strange concept. Can you imagine being completely incapable of thought for all eternity? How would that even be? It is an easy way to avoid answering the core question to talk about others' experiences of you once you are gone, or to say that your physical body decomposes into the environment. But what about your experience? It is not possible to think about what it might be like to be unable to think. Therein lies the problem with nothing. It seems paradoxical both before you were born and after your death. And yet here is the real kicker that nobody seems to mention. Something brought you into this world. The version of you that is conscious, can think, and knowingly interact with the environment. How can you be so certain this is a one-time deal? Why should your life be a single, unique chapter in all human history, and not have happened before and not happen again, and so on into infinity? How is everyone so completely certain of this? That is the strangest thing of all. Story 104. They will probably sell my house to the council and build a motorway through it. Story 105. Your family and friends suffer greatly until your absence no longer affects them and they continue with their lives. Story 106. We were told our mother wouldn't live much longer, a few days at most. That night, I awoke with a feeling I had never experienced before. There are no words to describe it. I just knew she had died. A few minutes later, my sister called to tell me our mother had died. She came by to tell me goodbye. Story 107. Living tissue begins to decay, producing ammonia gas that causes the body to swell and emit a strong, unpleasant odor. Story 108. Your plasma spirit travels to the plasma world, also known as heaven or hell, in space. Story 109. It will be just like before you were conceived. I don't know about you, but I remember it being really peaceful. Story 110. Nothing, probably. I have been struggling with this concept a lot recently, to the point of depression. I was raised to believe in a higher power and had religion forced on me. The older I get, the more I realize that when we die we are forgotten quickly. Life moves on without us. We may remain in people's thoughts for a while, but eventually it will be as if we never existed. Religion is a human invention to give us hope or motivation to do good and to keep living. Story 111. The most comforting answer to this question I have ever heard is, we go home. I love that. Story 112. Your life energy or soul becomes unbound from its physical prison and is reabsorbed into the higher realms of existence, into the fabric of space-time. You become one with God and the universe. You may or may not be reincarnated in the past or future, depending on how far your soul has traveled. It will be okay. I am you and you are me. Story 113. I believe in reincarnation, but not that I would come back as an animal. In the distant future, my particles will rejoin in an almost identical but slightly different pattern, which is why I experience déjà vu. I have nearly lived that moment before in a past life. Story 114. I hope to see my dog, but realistically I will not. When you die, you are gone. Story 115. I hope it's me walking through a doorway into a living room where my father and uncle are waiting. We can share a drink, laugh, and sit beside a roaring fire, and I can tell them how much they are missed. Story 116. It's the same as being under anesthesia. Whoever has experienced it knows what I'm talking about. You feel strange for a moment, then lights out. No dreams, no memories, no sense of time passing. You just open your eyes again, or you do not, depending on how the surgery went. Knowing that hours had passed and I felt none of it was one of the most liberating feelings I have ever had. I have told people I miss that feeling, if you can call it that, because I had never experienced anything like it. Even sleep does not compare, since there is still activity during sleep. But as a person with chronic suicidal ideation from multiple mental health conditions, it is frightening because I know that if I died, I would not even be able to feel bad or sad about it. The living me worries about my children and my wife. Even then, I would not carry that worry into nothingness. I would simply cease to exist. This is why I think, as a species, we invented spirituality and stories of an afterlife. Without them, many more people would have killed themselves in times of famine, war, or even inconvenience. It is humbling that I, sitting on the toilet, could have an aneurysm and not even know that I died, and that the entirety of the universe would pass as if I had never known. I always hope there is more, but realistically I conclude with about 99.9999999% confidence that nothing does, based on real-world evidence. Story 117. I think my consciousness is generated by metabolic and bioelectrical processes. When I die, those functions will stop and my self will dissipate. Story 118. I feel we are reborn as another person. Our souls fly away and enter a newborn coming into the world. Story 119. I think common near-death experiences are the most likely explanation. Story 120. Your body is pumped full of chemicals so it doesn't rot or turn to ash. Your family and friends miss you. Story 121. You go somewhere else, reunite with loved ones, and perhaps have a new beginning. It has always been this way, so be it. Story 122. I truly believe that nothing happens. Only non-existence. Story 123. I have thought about this a lot, especially in recent years as I have gotten older. Growing up Catholic and later becoming an atheist, I find myself returning to belief in God, not in the way the church describes, but in what God represents. I have taken psychedelics, which changed my perspective on consciousness. I tried dimethyltryptamine but never left the waiting room. I strongly believe our consciousness or soul leaves our bodies when we die. Consciousness carries with us. The church taught us to treat others with kindness and respect, and the way you treat others carries on after you die. I have seen many online videos of people describing brief deaths. Many describe calm and happiness, seeing people and immediately knowing everything about them. Others describe an eternity of torment, punished forever for wrongdoing, where they instantly knew the wrongs they had done without being told. I do not fully accept the teachings of the church, especially the Catholic Church. But I believe God enables consciousness and awareness, and allows us to interact and connect. Have you ever run into someone you have never met and felt they were evil, or felt they were very kind? I believe that is your subconscious signaling you. I am not sure whether God created consciousness or is consciousness itself. God has given us free will, and what we do with it will carry into the afterlife. Those who deliberately cause pain to others for personal gain will pay for it, while those who are kind will be rewarded. It is never too late to seek forgiveness, but that requires genuine change. In short, I believe we go somewhere when we die, and our actions in life determine the nature of our afterlife, whether peace and happiness or despair and pain. People in positions of power who take advantage of others carry that guilt before God and must live with it. If you read the Bible and interpret not only what it says but what it describes, it can make sense. We must remember the Bible has been retold, rewritten, and translated over centuries. So much of what you read is not how it was originally written. Story 124. I have it on good authority that we come back as the thing we hated most in this lifetime. For me, it is a toss-up between roaches and politicians. Story 125. My spirit plays practical jokes on all the doctors, making them think they can save a dead man. Story 126. You lose the sense of separation and your identity. Return to the spiritual flow, like a water drop returning to the ocean. Story 127. I think everyone is right. You get what you expect. If you are a devout Pastafarian, you get a beer volcano. If you are Christian, you live in the light of God. If you are an atheist, you simply cease to exist. If you are agnostic, the outcome is less clear. We live in an incomprehensibly large universe. There are clues and hints that other universes may overlay this one. If that is the case, there would have to be an infinite number of them, and therefore infinite possibilities for what happens when we die. All of those possibilities are valid. Story 128. It is the same thing that happens to a computer program when the computer it is running on is destroyed. Story 129. Once I lose consciousness, my body begins to decompose. It's over. I no longer exist beyond a corpse. Story 130. I think the lifelong biochemical hallucination of life transitions into the chemical silence of death. Story 131. What is Reddit's sudden fascination with death? I have seen so many posts asking this on the subreddit True Off My Chest and on the subreddit Atheism, of all places. Story 132. I hope people find what they are looking for. I think nothing will happen. Story 133. My dude, this is Reddit. Most people here are atheists. Why bother asking? Story 134. Pippin. I didn't think it would end like this. Gandalf. End? No, the journey doesn't end here. Death is just another path, one that we all must take. The gray rain curtain of this world rolls back, and all turns to silver glass, and then you see it. Tip in what? Gandalf? See what? Gandalf. White shores and beyond. A far green country under a swift sunrise. Tip in, well, that isn't so bad. Gandalf. No, it isn't. Story 135. If you die, your brain activity ceases. Brain activity is you. If your brain is not active, you are not able to receive stimulation and you would not perceive anything. If you have ever had those moments when you fell asleep and seemed to wake up instantly a few hours later, whatever feeling you had during the time you were asleep is likely what it feels like to be dead. Nothing. Story 136. The Bengals win the Super Bowl. On a long enough timeline, nearly all things are possible. Story 137. I don't know, and I'm perfectly fine with that. There's no need to make up a story to comfort myself. Story 138. From the perspective of the individual's conscious self. Absolutely nothing. I do not think the sensation will be like falling asleep, but more like losing consciousness. In that case, you simply will not wake up. Like being knocked out or losing consciousness in a high-G fighter plane. Your primitive brain may still function, but your higher faculties will be offline. As for what comes after that, nothing from your perspective. Everything that has ever comprised you will continue to exist as long as existence persists, but the idea of an eternal heaven is, in my opinion, a hopeful delusion, at least in the common interpretation of heaven and hell. A literal heaven and hell implies that pious morality is a valid tenet and a universal constant. The only evidence for that are human-constructed concepts. Morality, right and wrong, good and evil, are human constructs developed through social evolution. They do not exist in the natural world. There may be behaviors that fit those constructs, but they are not the same. If a human kills and eats another human, that is considered objectively evil and wrong within human morality. If a chicken kills and eats another chicken, nature is just brutal. What is the difference between the two actions? When the Galactic Empire blows up Alderaan with the Death Star, that is evil and wrong. If a rogue planet were to strike Alderaan and destroy it, would that be evil or wrong? Only if humans say so. My point is that I do not think you will end up in a heaven or hell beyond the memories of those who remember you. A literal afterlife requires a lot of things to be true that, personally, I see no evidence for. Yes, it kind of sucks that you will simply cease to be a person with a sense of self, but that cessation will not matter to you because you will no longer have subjective experience. Story 139. Your immortal soul leaves your mortal body and either ascends to a higher level or remains in this dimension. Story 140. I really hope nothing happens because I do not want to do this again. Story 141. The answer depends on how you define you. When you die, you will not have to endure everlasting non-existence, because that is not an experience. Many people fear that when they die, they will be locked in a dark room forever. Try to imagine what it would be like to go to sleep and never wake up. If you think long enough about that, it will raise the next question. What was it like to wake up after never having gone to sleep? That was when you were born. You cannot have an experience of nothing, so after you are dead, the only thing that can happen is the same sort of experience as when you were born. Alan Watts. Story 142. I will never know that I am dead. I will return to how I felt before my conception in February 1944. Story 143. The nothingness is equivalent to whatever you experienced before birth. I do not believe in an afterlife. Story 144. The only thing I can say with certainty is that no one knows. Story 145. Remember the place you were in before you were born? You return to it. Story 146. We live in a solar system. There are about 400 billion planetary systems in our galaxy. There are 1 to 2 trillion galaxies in the universe. We know there was a creation event in which everything came from nothing, starting from the size of a pinhead. The universe has physical properties that support life, which seems unlikely to be the result of chance. One explanation is an infinite number of universes, and ours is the Goldilocks one. Another is that there was an intelligent creator. It is hard for me to believe this is all random and without purpose. Existence is stranger than we know, and it is not unreasonable to think there may be something after death. Personally, I am beginning to think we are in a simulation. Quantum experiments, such as the double-slit experiment and quantum erasure, suggest that possibility. If we are in a simulation, there must be a higher intelligence designing it. Story 147. As comforting as nothingness would be, both as an easy Reddit answer that the majority will not disagree with and as the comforting thought of not having to worry about anything after death, non-existence is not possible. Otherwise, we would not exist in the first place. So whatever the answer is, it is definitely something less convenient than nothingness. That is my personal belief. Story 148. You begin to deteriorate until you are only bones on the ground. Story 149. We return to where we were before we were born. Some say it is back to the universe because we are energy beings and energy cannot be destroyed. Look at our planet. Everything regenerates. Plants and flowers often grow again after dying in the cold of fall, and leaves that lose their green return in different forms. It all comes back, and I believe we will all return. Maybe not to this world. If you want to live in a time that has passed on Earth and that time cannot be relived here, it would have to take place on another planet where an era, decade, or year has not yet happened. Maybe you would want to experience what life would have been like if things were different. I would like to live on a world where Donald Trump was never the leader of the free world, or at least where leaders showed more sense. You could remain in a void where you are nothing but aware of that nothing. In that state, you would surrender creating for emptiness, and it would be far worse than life here. That is a hell worse than any imagined by some Christian groups. You would eventually want out of the void. Nothing comes with a price you may not be willing to pay. An eternity of nothing where you cannot create or experience the tapestry of life. In the void, all you have is yourself, aware but not able to imagine anything beyond it. You can remember, and there is an escape, but you must remember what it was to escape. No one there can tell you because they are all in the same condition. Story 150. The same thing that happens when a candle is blown out. The chemical reaction that is life stops. Story 151. I don't believe it's just nothingness. That kind of certainty feels too final for something we've never experienced. Maybe it is peace, a return, or something beyond the limits of this version of reality. Either way, I believe that what we do while we're alive echoes after us, even if we can't see how yet. Story 152. I think the pineal gland releases dimethyltryptamine into the brain and can turn a microsecond into an eternity. Everyone and everything that tries to calcify your pineal gland is truly evil, robbing you of your afterlife, as it were. Story 153. I like to think the energy we are becomes part of something larger. Whether that means it is released into the world or into space, I do not know. We have all of eternity to become something new, and what is eternity if you do not even know you are still floating out there, waiting to change? Story 154. Sorry to be pessimistic, but I think there is nothing left. We no longer exist except in the memories of those who love us. All the information that makes us who we are is lost forever. Story 155. Well, the world goes on without you. I think it's sad that people feel they need to believe there is something after death. There is an empty void. Just accept it. Story 156. We return to the earth, and hopefully our loved ones will remember us well. Story 157. The way I see it, when you die, you revert to the state you had before you were conceived, with the subtle difference that you now have remains. Matter cannot be destroyed. It can only change form, so I like to think that indigenous people who regard the hills as their ancestors are onto something. That reminds me, this year a human jawbone was found in some travertine in a quarry in Italy, so you could also end up as a tile in someone's bathroom after that. Story 158. Your energy fractures into a million pieces and scatters away, floating like precipitation in a cloud, gathering until the crowded molecules come together to create new life, where you simply fade away. Lights out. Story 159. I was not raised to believe anything one way or another, and after 4 decades, left to my own devices, what I think happens after we die is that we cease to exist. I also think that because mortality is so upsetting, human societies have consistently developed ideas that make people feel better about it. Story 160. My father recently died. I believed he would tell me if he could. If anyone could, he would. Because he has not, I do not know. Story 161. I found this years ago. Enjoy. Quantum mechanics does not rule out the possibility of an afterlife universe or dimension, a multiverse, or the survival of brain function after death, sometimes called quantum immortality. Through quantum decoherence and quantum superposition, the idea of parallel universes offers the possibility of a communicating parallel universe that could act as a person's afterlife when death occurs. As derived from the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics and its extension, the many minds interpretation, it is theoretically possible for a living person to exist in superposition in a parallel universe, including their mental states and the electrical discharges throughout their brain and nervous system. Many worlds views reality as a many-branch tree in which every possible quantum outcome is realized, including branches that do not lead to a person's death. Theoretically, this makes it possible for a person to continue living in a parallel universe when they die in this current universe. More support for the possibility of survival after death comes from the string theory interpretation of the holographic principle in quantum physics. This principle describes our universe as a hologram in which all the quantum information we perceive in 3 dimensions is stored. First proposed, in forms by physicist David Bohm, who developed Bohmian mechanics and co-authored the holonomic brain theory with Carl Pribram, a holographic universe can theoretically encode each quantized moment of our existence and experiences. Rather than a constant flow of experience, mental states can be broken into intervals or time quanta of about 0.042 seconds, each of which makes up one moment of neural activity. Each state consists of a specific amount of quantum information that could theoretically be stored, and significant progress is ongoing in related technologies. This holographic model of reality allows for phenomena sometimes considered paranormal, such as near-death experiences, other reports of life after death, and mental telepathy. The universe as a single hologram also addresses the mystery of quantum entanglement that Albert Einstein called spooky action at a distance. Also, the materialist model of conventional science is based on the old paradigm of Newtonian classical mechanics and is fundamentally limited. Several conventional materialist assumptions have been challenged in the last century by the science of quantum electrodynamics, including locality, causality, continuity, determinism, and absolute certainty. At the core of materialism, the fundamental nature of consciousness is often ignored, even though some pioneers of quantum mechanics believed consciousness plays a definite role in creating reality. Mainstream materialist theories of consciousness typically use classical mechanics and assume consciousness emerged from biological processes alone, focusing on complex computation at synapses that allow communication between neurons. Because quantum vibrations had been observed in microtubules in the brain, the Penrose and Hameroff theory has garnered significant attention. Story 162. I know what happens. You will not believe me. Story 163. I will be cremated, then placed in a box and set on a shelf at home. Some will buy a small burial plot so the worms will have food. That's about it. Story 164. I think your mind creates what it does in your last moments. That last moment extends to infinity from your perspective. Story 165. If you are a good person and a believer, you go to heaven. If you are a bad person, you are simply dead. You no longer exist in any form. Story 166. I think nothing happens. The more you do, good or bad, the more you live on in people's memories. The only difference is whether the memory is good or bad and how long it lasts. The lights go out and you are gone. It is a sad story. In my humble opinion, it would be nice to receive whatever you deserve or whatever some religions promise, but that all feels like a scam. Story 167. My religion teaches that you go to heaven, hell, or purgatory. I personally believe that, but I think there is more to it. Spirits illustrate this. Some are good, some are bad, and some are neutral spectators depending on where they went. People have claimed to be reborn, which I think could be true. You are repeatedly reborn until you get life right. Every theory seems plausible. Before life, nothing existed, so nothing could happen afterward. Simulation theory is possible, since life seems too extraordinary to arise by chance. A higher power, for me God, is also plausible for the same reason. Overall, I believe you go to heaven, hell, or purgatory. Story 168. You come from nothing and you go back to nothing. Leave behind good memories of your time on this rock. Story 169. There was nothing before, then something came after. Maybe it is a cycle. You die, go to purgatory, and live again. Story 170. Everything goes black, and big white letters spelling game over appear. Story 171. I think my wife and son will be very sad for a while. My son's wife is a very strong, sweet young woman, and I know she will help support them through their grief. Story 172. Nothing happens. You simply die and live only in the memories of other people, including your family. Story 173. In my estimation, you ultimately give in to the overwhelming urge to rest. It is as if a lifetime punctuated by nightly sleep is all in preparation for your final moment. Story 174. My beliefs are based on the Bible, so when you die it is like being in a deep sleep. You are conscious of nothing, as stated in Ecclesiastes 9 verses 5 to 6. You remain in that state until Jehovah God fulfills the promises to resurrect us from the dead. As described in John 5 verses 28 to 29 and Acts 24 verse 15. Some will be raised to heaven and others to an earthly paradise where there will be no pain or suffering and we can enjoy life forever, as promised in Psalms 37 verse 29 and Revelation 21 verses 3 to 4. I look forward to that time. Story 175. I hope for reincarnation, but I am afraid it will be nothing. Story 176. I believe this is not the only life we will experience, nor the only one we have experienced. I am not spiritual or religious anymore, but if I experience consciousness once, I get the feeling I will experience it again later. Even if we are simply matter that occupies the universe, it makes sense to me that that matter could take many forms. It might even be an instant transference, since one does not experience the passage of time when dead. The lights go out, the slate is wiped clean, and one emerges on the other side. In short, a cycle. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.